Hi everyone, Franco Revi here, and I hope you're all good. So for this video, we're going to do something different compared to my previous vids. I got feedback from my friends who watched my previous vids that they do like the informative videos more, which I agree with. So for this video, we're going to discuss what I believe are the top 5 beginner electric guitar techniques you should know to improve your playing or spice up your playing. So just a disclaimer, I am not a professional guitar teacher. I will just be showing you these techniques and how they work and how they sound. But of course, along the way, I will show you how I play it, but it will be more of the effect of the sound and will not focus on the how-to. Before we begin, I know I mentioned in the title and a while ago that these are beginner electric guitar techniques, but generally you can do this with other guitars, so if it's a classical or acoustic, but it will be a bit harder because the said guitars have thicker strings and the height from the body is higher, so there might be more of a difficulty. But if your hands are strong enough, if your fingers are strong enough, then you can do it with any guitar. Also, I will be assuming that you're at a level where you can play a series of notes confidently in your guitar. So without further ado, let's begin. Now, in no particular order, the first technique we're going to learn is the vibrato. So for me, vibrato is one of the most important guitar techniques you should learn to add life to your playing. It adds life because it makes the note less dull and less static. And I recall watching one of Steve Vai's video, a good video about his vibrato, and how he said that adding vibrato adds soul to the note you're playing. So you can think of this technique like operatic singers when they add tremolo to their voice. Singing a note and they're sustaining it has this wavy characteristic, kind of like this. So in the guitar, there are two basic ways of achieving vibrato. The first is the more classical approach, which is you hit a note and you keep pressure in it, but while you're keeping pressure on the note you're fretting, you wiggle it back and forth, left and right. So this is the wiggling technique.
Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
Now, I seldom use this technique because I find it more difficult to control, but when I do, I kinda lift my thumb out of the fretboard and wiggle it. So here's a sample. So this is a very weird feeling at first, and at first if you're just doing this for the first time, you most likely won't hear any difference, but just keep on practicing. Once your fingers get stronger, you'll hear the difference. It's very subtle but very effective. So the second way of achieving a vibrato is sort of a bend technique, but we will discuss that later. For this technique, I use this more because I feel there's more control. So how this works is you pick a note and you bend the note very slightly and then go back to the original position, and you do this multiple times to create a sort of wavy effect. An important reminder here is to make sure that you're doing the vibrato on the target note, because the tendency usually is should go sharp, then do the vibrato from there. So keep in mind to vibrato the note that you want to vibrato. Also, it's very important that if you would practice this, to practice this with your 4 fingers, not just the dominant 3. So what you would do is you pick a note, vibrato it using your index, your middle, your ring, and your pinky. Now I'm going to show you a solo with vibrato and without vibrato, and you tell me which one sounds better. is the bend technique. So the bend is another expressive technique in my opinion. It's kind of like the vibrato, but we're taking it a bit further. Because for vibrato, you're only focusing on one note, which you're applying the vibrato effect. For bend, you have a starting note and you have a target note. So a bend occurs when you play a note and you push the string upwards or pull the string downwards, increasing the pitch of the note you're playing. So the most common increase of a pitch is the half note or the whole note, but 1.5 is also possible. So there are 3 common bend types. The first one is the bend up, the next is the bend release, and the last is the pre-bend. I'll show you these right now. So when you're bending, you can use your pointing finger, your middle finger, or your ring finger, whichever is most convenient for you when it comes to playing your solos. But the most important thing to remember is to hit your target notes. So this is what you'll need to practice, because a common mistake is you would bend flat or you would bend sharp from the intended note that you want to play. So pick a starting note and pick your target note and bend to that pitch. So this target note can be 1, 2, or 3 notes away from your starting note. And try bending with your ring finger, your middle finger, and your pointing finger if possible. I'll show you the sample. So the third technique is the hammer-ons and pull-offs. So I put these 2 techniques together because they generally have the same idea. You would use a hammer-on if you'd want to move up to a note, and you'd use the pull-off if you want to move down to a note. So these techniques, this hammer-on pull-offs, are transition techniques if you want to transition to your target note smoothly and without having the harshness of a pick or plucking. So a hammer-on is done by striking your first note and tapping to the target higher note with the remaining fingers of your left hand. And it could be any of the fingers as long as you're able to do it comfortably. So another cool way to use this hammer-on technique is to play an open string, an open note, and then hammering on to a target note. Could be 2 notes or 3 notes, kinda like this. pull-off is kinda like the hammer-on but in reverse. For the hammer-on's case, you'd have a starting note and you'd want to go to a note that's higher. For the pull-off, you have a starting note and you want to go to a note that's lower. So this is best demonstrated than explained. So here's my example. So remember, you're pulling the note downwards. You're not just simply lifting your finger off the fret. This is a common mistake amongst beginners. Now same with the hammer-ons, you can also utilize the open string to achieve wider note intervals. Kinda like this. Now for the fourth and personally my favorite, the tapping technique. So guitar tapping for me is one of the most showy techniques out there. I remember I had my recital before and I played Always With Me, Always With You by Joe Satriani on stage. And once I started doing the tapping solo, everybody in the crowd started clapping. So for me, I had the notion that this technique was the best showy technique to show to non-players. So the tapping is kinda like hammer-ons in a sense, but you're not limited to your left fingers. You can use your right fingers to tap virtually anywhere on the fretboard. And the way you tap, there's so many ways on how you can tap and the combinations are endless. But for this video, we're gonna keep it simple. So the simplest way to start tapping is using a right middle finger, tapping the note and pulling it off to a target note that's already been fretted by the left hand. Kinda like this. So you can move your tapping note around to get a feel of the fretboard. Next is to do the opposite. So what we'll actually do here is we'll start plucking a note and then tapping to your target note. Kinda like this. So to take it a step further, we can actually use our two left fingers and using our right tapping finger for a 3-note sequence. Also applying the hammer-on technique. Now it doesn't always have to be your right middle finger. Generally, you'd want to tap with your pointing, your middle, and your ring. But this requires lots of practice because you'd have to develop calluses, or the Tagalog term, callos. Callos is food. You'd have to develop callos in your right hand. Let me search. So yeah, callo. And also, since in my case I used to pick a lot, I have to figure out how I'm going to transition from picking to tapping. So there are techniques on how to hide the pick. So this one you'd have to figure out. Important thing to practice here is the transition from picking to tapping smoothly. And before we move to the next technique, personally for me the tapping is the hardest technique out of these 5 beginner techniques, because there's such more to it than just tapping. Of course there's muting the strings, so there's a factor where you have to play it cleanly. But it's very doable. And last but not the least, the slide technique. So slides for me is one of the most easiest techniques to learn, and it's one of the most effective ways to transition from one note to another. You can transition to virtually anywhere in the fretboard and it looks cool. So to play this, you just simply have to pick a starting note and slide to your target note in the same string. Your target note can be above or below your starting note, it doesn't really matter. What you have to keep in mind is that when you're sliding, you have to keep your finger fretted. And do not lift your finger up the string, or else you're gonna cancel the slide. So again, super simple technique, and it looks cool because you're moving your fingers up and down. Simple but effective. Now that we've covered the 5 techniques, let's do something fun. I'm going to play a guitar solo with and without techniques, and let's see how much of an impact the technique does to your playing. So there it is guys, the top 5 electric guitar techniques which you should learn and you should start playing. So just a note, it doesn't mean that if you don't use these techniques that your playing won't sound good. If you don't want to use techniques and that's how you want your sound, or that's how you intended your sound to be, then that's just fine. So knowing these techniques and knowing how to utilize these techniques will give you more tools under your belt, so you'll be able to express yourself more since you know more. And again, I didn't mean this video to be a tutorial, so if you found some of these techniques interesting, then I highly encourage to go online, go to YouTube or get a teacher and ask them how these techniques are played. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It took longer to make it, but I had fun doing this. And I'd like to shout out to my friend or our church deacon, Anjo Franco, whose last name is my second name. I just appreciate him for always commenting on my videos, always giving me good advice. So thank you, brother. And I also plan to mod this guitar. So this is a made in China Mine Sign guitar. This was given to me by my girlfriend 2 years ago. So this is a very special guitar, and I plan to really do a heavy mod on this. I'll change the pickup, change the bridge, change the tuners. Basically, I'm gonna change the guitar. So you guys watch out for that. So if you guys have any suggestions, comments, requests, please leave them down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and also consider subscribing if you haven't yet. Again, this is Franco Revi, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you for watching and keep on playing.